If someone told you the only way to keep your kids safe was to end a family visit early, even if it was on Christmas, would you be able to do it? What if saying no meant risking everyone you love turning against you? Most of us hope that family is where we're the safest, but that has not been John and Morgan's experience. And they're about to step into a room where protecting their kids might turn them into the villains. Last week in therapy, they learned about how emotional immaturity can twist a story inside of a family system. And this week, everything shifts because today, someone finally says, enough. It's just before Christmas. Several months have passed since that day where John's dad, Frank, rushed their front door and tried to force entry into their home. After that day, something just gave out in John and he fell into a deep depression until one day Morgan suggested therapy, and that's where he's been for months. But now he's not alone. Morgan joins him in sessions as they learn about emotional immaturity and how you set boundaries with emotionally immature parents. In the waiting room, the sunlight is spilling across the floor. It's actually filtering through an overgrown spider plant. The air smells like burnt coffee and lemons. John is just pressing his thumb into a tear in an old chair. It's a nervous habit he picked up as a kid. Morgan sits beside him, squeezing his hand once and twice, just quietly saying, I'm here. You're not alone. We're in this together. They get up, they walk into the therapist's office for what feels like the most important session of their lives. Inside the room, their therapist takes a seat directly across from them and just sits quietly, letting them just kind of take up space in the room. He finally breaks the silence with gentle authority by sharing that it's totally normal to feel scared or afraid to set boundaries with parents. I mean, they raised us, they've always set the rules. And even now as adults, there's a part of us that wants their approval, or at least wants to avoid disappointing them. He then looks at John and continues, and John, ever since you were a boy, you learned no costs a lot in your family. You stopped giving your dad what he wanted, and he completely withdrew from you. That's real pain. John, feeling completely seen, allows himself to settle into the sofa, and he replays a dark memory that he keeps tucked away. The last time he said no to his dad, Frank, he spoke so quietly, not wanting to hurt his dad's feeling. And he was actually shocked that his dad heard him say, Dad, I don't want to play baseball anymore. And just like that, those arms that used to lift John up to the sky after he got a home run just completely disappeared and was replaced by stone silence. But today isn't about baseball. It's about Christmas and the next generation, because John and Morgan, they know that they can't keep carrying on this hurt. Currently, they are estranged from John's parents, but 9 months ago, when all this started, life looked and felt completely different. Morgan breaks the tension with her soft but determined voice. Carter got a note home from school. He completed every lesson this week without redirection, and he's not so quiet. Like, he was so quiet before this rupture even started. He's laughing at home again. The teacher said he's engaging in class, raising his hand, so everything feels a lot better. She's now rubbing John's hand as if she's trying to reassure him, but also herself, that they're doing something right here today. The therapist agrees that, these are big wins, very important wins to document the progress along the way, especially right now in the thick of it when it starts to feel scary because you're about to set limits. He then clicks his pen, jots down, I'm sure, what Morgan told him in his notepad, and they continue. Morgan's stomach, you guys, is so tight. She's just dreading the moment where she has to tell Frank and Elaine that there are real limits, there are real rules now with the boys. John is just silent, staring at the floor, counting the diamonds in the carpet. But finally, he lets out the question that's just clawing at him. How long will this peace last? Like, when my dad finds out there are real rules, won't this all just start over again? Morgan's like, I'm thinking the same thing. Like, as soon as we tell them no, the whole family's going to come after us. Is this the pattern that we have to go through forever when we just want to be parents to our own children? Their therapist just nods because it's real. It's real. The pattern in this family is you belong if you comply. But he doesn't want to play in, he doesn't want to go down that rabbit hole yet. He really wants to stay on track. So the therapist promises that eventually they will get to those fears, but today is about mapping out their very first boundary. So he continues. What from Elaine or Frank has hurt your boys the most? Morgan's voice is tight when she starts listing things off. They break the rules, even when we say no, especially Frank. We say no, he says yes. He mocks us when we try to stay consistent at home. Sometimes he says he's joking, he's just trying to have fun. Sometimes he blames our kids. But then at his house, and when he's babysitting at our house, if Carter does something to Blake on purpose, like he's mean to Blake, he's not there to make him fix it. There are no consequences for Carter. John just puts his head in his hands. He just mutters what he's too embarrassed to say out loud. Carter thinks Grandpa is the boss of everyone, even us. When I tell him no, he says, Grandpa says I don't have to listen to you. So whether Grandpa's here or not there, Carter doesn't believe rules apply to him. The silence is so long and unbearable. John finally lets out this sigh that's half defeat and half recognition, how did I let this go on so long? What was I thinking? The therapist explains how most parents do the very best they can until they learn something new, and healthy parents then make some adjustments. And that's what they're doing here. John didn't let his dad run the show because he agreed with him. He let it happen because as a kid, he learned the fastest way to get any love from his dad and to keep him close was just to stay smaller than his dad. That kind of nervous system training doesn't just disappear because John grew up. Now the therapist leans in and asks the second question. What did this break away from the grandparents teach you guys? Morgan jumps in again. Our boys need one set of rules. When the grown-ups are not working together, it's chaos. No matter how clear we try to say it, if someone is in the background undercutting our work, everything unravels. John points at a thread like he's connecting the dots. When Carter is breaking the rules at school, the teacher says he always smiles. He's got this really charismatic grin. My dad has that same grin. When he's breaking the rules, he just smiles at us, just kind of melts the room. I believe Carter is mimicking my dad. The therapist agrees. Yes, John, you're seeing the pattern. Now, what do you love about Frank and Elaine? What do you want back in your life? What's the best case scenario going forward? John's answer was heartbreakingly simple. I just want family dinners again. I want my dad to come over and fix stuff. He loves to help. I want him to be able to do that again. It makes him feel useful. Obviously, it's nice for us, but it really is important to my dad. And my mom, she's just always buzzing around in the background, making everybody feel extra comfortable with all her little touches. And the boys, they love their grandma. The therapist grabs his mug to take a sip of his tea. It's a mug he uses every session. It's a child's painted gift. And he says, okay, last question before we move on to the next phase. What are you most afraid of if you enforce real change? John and Morgan softly, almost at the same time, that Elaine will spread lies and that everyone will get riled up. Mindy, John's sister, will stir the pot and we'll be right back in the same battle. John's voice cracks, but he chokes out, my biggest fear is that my dad never talks to me again. Morgan grabs that hand of his, squeezing it a couple times, I'm here. But neither of them say it out loud. What their biggest fear is that would protecting their kids mean losing John's family entirely? The therapist just lets the tension breathe and then offers them reassurance by saying, you don't have to feel trapped in this fear anymore. You're going to plan ahead. Your plan is supported by your boundary map with adjusted expectations. You guys now understand emotional immaturity. And with that, you guys can get through anything. We covered this last week about emotional immaturity. When you say Elaine is lying, I want to correct you. That is her version of the truth. When you told her what the teacher said, it felt to your mom, it felt to Elaine like you were taking the boys, you were abandoning them, you were punishing them. So what she felt is what she heard, and that's what she told, and then that's why the mob came at you. Her version of events, yes, it is distorted. Yes, it is far away from what happened in reality. But remember, with emotionally immature parents, with emotionally immature people, what they feel is their reality. So whatever they felt in the moment, that is their truth. So when you say Elaine is going to lie again, I want you to remember that Elaine will speak her truth. I want you to remember that because it makes you resent the emotionally immature person more if you think they're actively trying to hurt you. The therapist then gets up and he grabs a whiteboard And with thick black marker, he writes access, authority, and aftercare. And he draws 3 columns. He looks at both Morgan and John, still drowning in worry, but continuing to push through for their boys. And the therapist explains what the board means. Access is who gets to be with your boys and under what terms. Authority is who's in charge in the room. Aftercare is how do you help your kids? How do you help yourself once a known line is crossed? The therapist then directs the question to Morgan first. What is the one rule you want to begin with today? No more sleepovers, she bursts out as if she's been thinking about this for, multiple days in a row. And then John, he just adjusts the rule by saying family visits only. Like if we're not there, the boys aren't there. The therapist writes under access, no unsupervised visits. He then confirms and continues, yes, good. This is going to be really good for Carter. It's going to keep him regulated. He's going to have one set of rules, and it will keep Blake feeling protected. Now the therapist continues to authority. You two are in charge. Frank and Elaine must support you as parents in front of the boys. Now, even though that sounds super simple, very clear, very easy to understand, some people who are emotionally immature can feel like this rule is attacking them personally. It can make them feel like you're calling them a bad grandparent. And then the reality would be you're saying they're a bad grandparent. So I have found that we get further in a conversation with emotionally immature parents if we make them feel safe along the way. Then he talks directly to John and he said, when you're communicating with your dad and you're going to tell him this rule, how can you start off the conversation by connecting first with your dad before correcting? Oh, John's like, oh my God, I'm on the spot. I don't know. So he thought a long time. Then he said, well, I guess I'll just tell my dad the truth. Like, Dad, I love having you over here. We love you here. The boys just watch out the window waiting for your orange Jeep to pull up. Going forward, we need your help. Like Morgan and I are going to enforce the rules. We're going to have parenting rules. We just need you to back us in front of the boys. The therapist gives him an encouraging nod. Like, yes, that's a great start. Now let's add in what's in it for him. So he says, let's say Frank is on the fence and he doesn't know if he wants to respect this request or not. What's in it for Frank? John thinks about it and he's like, well, I don't know. I guess if he lets Morgan and I be parents and doesn't actively undermine us, he still gets to be the fun grandpa. The therapist cleans it up. He's like, yeah, that sounds good. So I think you're saying that way you can still be the fun grandpa, we'll be the disciplinarians, and the boys can feel safe and more relaxed. That's how you present a limit as a benefit. You're inviting him in, you're not pushing him out. The therapist then gets a smile on his face and says, all right, let's practice this. Morgan, Frank breaks a rule in front of the kids. What do? Morgan hesitates. Oh my gosh, I don't know. I'm going to freeze. He's never listened to anything. And after everything we've gone through, I'm afraid if I try to enforce anything, it's going to make everything worse. After the therapist validates her concerns, he continues. If Frank breaks this new rule and he undermines you in front of the boys, you're going to end the visit early. That's not mean. That's follow through. Even on Christmas, it teaches your boys that you mean what you say, and that structure, that makes kids feel safe. John's eyes are like, oh my gosh, even on Christmas? Yes, the therapist continues or confirms, even on Christmas, if you don't follow through, your rule is just a wish. Morgan's mind just flashes to the barrage of Minion Mob texts and voicemails from Aunt Tina. You did what on Christmas? You're a monster, all this stuff. And the therapist stays calm, anchoring them back into reality and says, yes, when emotionally immature people feel attacked by your boundaries, their brain sounds an alarm that screams, danger, danger. And because they can't self-soothe, much like a young child, they reach for support. And when they do that, they share their version of their story, which is a story twist that 100% makes them the victim, you the villain. And that's what sends the Minion Mob to get things back in order for the family system. Your job as parents is to hold the line for your boys, not worry about pleasing the group. Before we get into what John should do if his dad sulks after a boundary is held, John had a great question. He asked about Mindy, his sister, like, what if she reaches out to me with a story twist? What am I supposed to say? And the therapist reflected back to their chat last week about triangulation, which is just a fancy term for when One person in the family doesn't like that another person set a limit or a boundary, so they pull in a third person to pressure the limit setter to pull them back into place, back into the family's like normal. And then the therapist just answered John's question. He said, you let your sister know, or the family member know, whoever's reaching out to you, that you will not be discussing what's going on between you and your parents with them. And then you remind your sister that your dad is a grown-up and that if his feelings are hurt, he can reach out just like she just did. John follows up with, so I don't just correct the narrative. I don't just tell her the truth. The therapist sits back in his chair after taking another sip from his handmade gift, puts the question back into John's lap. John, how did clarifying the narrative work over these past 9 months? And all of a sudden, it just clicked. The therapist continued, the more that you can stay out of the drama triangle, the faster all this gets resolved through direct communication. But that was an excellent question. That's what the therapist said to John. Excellent question. Now I have one for you. What do you do if your dad is sulking after you end the visit early? How are you going to respond? John shakes his head. He doesn't know. So he just starts reaching for Morgan's hand to try to remind him like, okay, I'm an adult. I'm a man with grown kids. I'm not a little boy in the dugout. And the therapist gives him a script to try out just to see, how does this feel for you, John? He says, maybe you could say something like, Dad, when we left early, that probably made you feel sad. I'm not trying to hurt you, but we have to keep the rules steady for the boys. So going forward, if we disagree in front of them, we're going to end the visit early and try again later. John feels the weight of those words and his eyes just start to glisten and the lump just fills his airway, yet he manages to choke out that the day he told his dad he was going to be a grandpa was the happiest moment of his life. That was the most love he had felt from his dad since Little League. And of course, we know where John's mind is going. He's afraid that if he sets too many restrictions, that his dad will turn and walk away again. The therapist reassures him, John, when your dad gets upset about being told no, he's not loving you less. He just has a younger part showing up as a defense to keep his control. We can't forget that access means safety for your father. So again, it's a defense that's coming up, not your dad loving you less. And you're allowed to protect your children from parts of your father that never grew up. Morgan's voice breaks through in barely a whisper. I just want Carter to stay gentle. I want them to know and love their grandparents, but they need to know that rules matter. The therapist hands her a tissue and offers a gentle smile and a reassuring nod, letting her know you're giving your kids that gift. Many would look at this situation like this or a situation like this and throw away the relationship. Like, you two? You are here saying there's so much good in this family. Like, the grandparents bring so much good to our children's lives. We don't want to take away everything just because there are these aspects that we need to figure out. Like, I respect you too for doing the work to figure out how can we have both? How can we have limits and allow our children to have a relationship with their grandparents? You're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And you guys, we cannot forget Frank and everything he went through. He had a tough childhood. And in order to protect himself from a dad who mocked him for crying and starved him of any emotional safety, he created rules. Be quick, always be helpful, don't show your emotions, and always stay in control. Why? Because love was conditional. It never mattered what Frank needed. Never. So the word no to him, he feels like he's back on that Midwestern farm being told that he doesn't matter. So Frank isn't evil. He just has parts of himself that never grew up. And he uses those parts to protect himself from feeling powerless. The therapist uncrosses his legs. He leans forward as if his body is trying to signal to Morgan and John, listen up, this is important. He says, Frank's not trying to hurt anyone. He is acting out of his own wounds. He's a little boy who learned the scariest words in his world are, you're not enough. Now let's go back to the example. Morgan, again, we're back. Frank just broke the new rule. What do you do? Morgan says more confidently, we leave. The therapist nods, yes. You get up, you let the boys know it's time to go. You privately share with Frank the reason we're leaving is the fact that we need your help backing us with our parenting. It's really important that the kids have consistency. Now, For whatever reason, if Frank decides he cannot respect your request, no problem. You end the visit early. Since you see each other almost daily, you could also add to your script, but we'll try again tomorrow. We love you. We just want to do right by the boys. John now can't even begin to hide the tears. He's allowing them to fall freely. The therapist can tell he needs this time just to let it out. So he sits in silence. Morgan's hand is right there, not squeezing, but just kind of caressing him, just trying to be nurturing. After a few minutes, the therapist cuts through the silence with something that feels like a warm, reassuring hand placed on John's shoulder, nice and steady. And he says, John, this hurts because you've always been the peacekeeper. You've always been the good son. And now you're the villain in their story because they have confused access with love. And your no feels like a betrayal. But making hard choices, caring for your sons above all else, that's real proof that you're growing. You're a grown-up and you're doing right by your family. The therapist closes out the session by saying, you guys don't have to be perfect. You just need to have a plan in each other. That's all you got to have. So here's what we learned today. Number 1, you need to connect before you correct. Number 2, state your limit simple and clear. We'll be doing the rules now, but we need you to back us in front of the kids. Number 3, frame the benefit like this is how it will benefit you. You can still be the fun grandpa, and it helps the boys stay relaxed and feel safe. And number 4, deliver the follow through, whether it's when you're communicating the boundary or the rule at first, or when you end the visit early, you can simply say, if you break this rule, we'll just end the visit early and try again next time. Morgan and John just look at each other so proud. They can't believe they made it through the session and they have a plan and they're ready. But the real test will be when Frank crosses the line, will they be able to follow through with their plan for their kids? The therapist ends by saying, you only have control around the peace you're building in your home. And I know this feels incredible, but the rest, what your family thinks and says and does, that's out of your control. You have to leave that. But just as peace begins to grow, a new question shatters their calm. That night, Morgan tucks Blake into bed and he finally says, Mom, if Grandpa comes back, will Carter still be nice to me? Her stomach sinks. Oh my gosh, she's just swallowed by guilt to have her kid have this worry. John is standing quietly in the doorway and he realizes the therapist is right. The next choice isn't just about keeping the rules intact, but whether their children can keep believing their home is safe. Next time, we're walking into Carter and Blake's world and we're going to see it through their eyes. What actually happens when a grandparent undermines a parent and why the wounds that follow aren't always visible until it's almost too late. I'll see you in the next episode.